to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show, live from Buckingham Palace. Lots to come today, of course, in our coronation special. I'm going to be speaking to Lucy Fraser, the Culture Secretary and the woman in charge of making sure that everything ran smoothly yesterday. As well as all things coronation, I'll be grilling her about the results of Thursday's local election. I'm also going to be speaking to Sir Robert Buckland, the former Justice Secretary who was the first man to be knighted by King Charles after he became king. And I'll be speaking to Elsa Anderson, who served as Queen Elizabeth II's press secretary. She'll be telling me about the sort of planning that goes into an event like the coronation and be on hand to dissect all of the gossip from yesterday's ceremony. Well, what a day it was yesterday. I don't think any of us have witnessed anything like it. We can make comparisons, can't we, to 1953, but the footage was quite grainy. It was taken from a distance, and what I thought we had yesterday was this up-close and personal view of monarchy, both as head of state, as a man, as a grandfather, as a husband, as a father. It was a very human ceremony, I thought, steeped in tradition, steeped in such personal elements like the anointing. In fact, that was one for me. The kind of most interesting part of the ceremony was the part we didn't see. And to see the king reduced to his dress shirt, kneeling before God, I thought was very, very moving. Zadok the priest, as ever, sending a shiver down the spine. So as we reflect on all that, obviously in this today's show, we're going to make it quite coronation themed because at the end of the day, why wouldn't we? And we're here in Buckingham Palace. You've been watching GB News throughout the entire week from this location, and I believe I'm the last show to broadcast live from this point. Now, before we go any further, let's just remind ourselves of what has been in the newspapers and the day's events. GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker has this great summary.
History in the making. A newly crowned king and queen greeted their subjects who, despite the rain, erupted in cheers and applause. The stage was set inside Westminster Abbey for a ceremony dating back to 1066, full of traditions with a modern twist. A VIP guest list of world leaders and foreign crowned princes were for the first time joined by community heroes who make a difference to people's lives. An opportunity for them to mingle with TV royalty as well as the real deal. Prince Harry, no robes or special uniforms, proudly displayed his military medals. No longer a working royal, he flew alone to attend his father's coronation. A fleeting visit, no time for small talk with his brother. Instead, flying back to California to attend his son's birthday celebrations.
Alleluia! Christ is risen.
Led by the Archbishop of Canterbury, the ceremony was full of tradition, religion, and service was at its heart.
Whether they be thrones or dominions.
Rishi Sunak, a practicing Hindu, gave a reading from the Bible as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Will you solemnly promise and swear?
His Majesty was presented to the people and swore an oath to them.
I solemnly promise so to do.
The most holy part of the service, the King donned a simple white shirt. This was a moment between him and God. Screens shielded him as the Archbishop of Canterbury anointed King Charles with holy oil. Perhaps the climax of the service, the moment the monarch received the royal regalia. The spurs, the sword of state, the super tunica, the orb, the sovereign's ring, a glove worn by his grandfather for his coronation, the sovereign's sceptre with cross, the rod of equity and mercy, and St. Edward's crown.
Pledge my loyalty to you.
The Prince of Wales, heir to the throne, pledged his allegiance to the King with a kiss on his father's cheek. King Charles's consort, who's been by his side for decades, was crowned and anointed as Britain's Queen. Their Majesties retired to St. Edward's Chapel. King Charles and Queen Camilla wore robes of estate to leave the Abbey. The coronation procession saw the largest number of military personnel since Winston Churchill's funeral march through central London. A small group of anti-monarchy protesters jeered in Trafalgar Square, but were mostly drowned out by royal fans. In the procession to Buckingham Palace, the Prince and Princess of Wales, along with their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, waved at onlookers from the Australian state coach. The royal family, pages and ladies in attendance smiled and waved for the jubilant crowds. A scaled-back flypast roared over central London. Today, coronation celebrations continue across the country. The third Carolean era has well and truly begun. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, as you can imagine, there's only one story in town when it comes to the newspapers this morning. Let's run through the front pages. The Sunday Times splashes with, "At last, their crowning glory." The Sunday Telegraph has a souvenir edition with a picture of the King and Queen on the front. The Observer, King Charles III, his crowning moment. The Mail on Sunday again uses a whole picture wipeout, the look that says, "Darling, it was a triumph." The Sunday Express, their headline simply reads, "Happy and glorious," with a picture of the King. And then the Sun on Sunday goes with, "Crowning glory." Again, a picture of the King holding the orb and the sceptre. And the Sunday Mirror simply says, "King Charles III," should anyone be in doubt as to who was crowned yesterday. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by Eve Pollard, editor of the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday Express formerly, and a Fleet Street legend. We call you that. Eve, I know your own grandchildren call you a legend now.
They call me Leggy.
That's because you are one. Now, let's go through some of our favourite highlights from the newspapers.
Sure.
The Telegraph front page picture. It's an interesting one because there's a degree of informality about it.
Yes, but it's them. I mean, many of the pages, and as you say, you've shown, have the king looking very, orb and sceptre, very serious. This one's got Camilla and Charles, i.e. the new king, the new queen, smiling,
yes,
looking happy.
We love a smile, don't we?
We love a
because
smile.
At certain points yesterday, people weren't really smiling.
No, and it was very serious, and it was very momentous, and it was very religious, and it was all the things a coronation should be. But at the end, all of our shoulders went down. We thought, they're happy, they've made it, it's happened.
Am I alone in finding some of the imagery slightly surreal, just having lived through the Princess Diana era, having remembered some of the headlines about Camilla back in the 90s and early noughties? There she is with a crown on her head, St Mary's crown, on the Buckingham Palace balcony with her own children, her own grandchildren.
Holding her train.
What do we think, Eve?
Well, I have to say, I always thought it would end up like this because I believe Prince Charles used to describe her as non-negotiable. And I thought at some stage he will inherit the crown and she will be there with him. So I just always thought this would be the moment. I never thought it would be so spectacular.
There will still be some who say, well, not my queen. You know, that they're very fond of Princess Diana still.
I understand that, and people feel like that. But this is a couple who've blended their families. That was the other interesting thing. Her grandchildren, not the earls and the dukes and all the rest of it, were carrying her train. And one of his grandchildren, Prince George, looking divine.
Did a great job aged 9.
Did a great job aged 9. He's going to be a very good king in his own time, isn't
Although
he?
Princess Charlotte leading the way with Louis was also super cute. She was playing the role of big sister and then Kate's mini-me with great aplomb with that headdress. Which was the same
and the
as her
little white.
mum's.
I hope that Alexander McQueen made that too.
You'd be proud parents, wouldn't you, being William
Very,
and Kate yesterday?
very.
'Cause I thought
They've done a great job.
Louis was taken out at one point.
He was taken out. I did notice that because if you've had a 4 or 5-year-old, that's just too long.
I thought it was a miracle he was in the service. Age
Miracle
5.
he was clean and tidy.
Amazing. Now, we talked about the crowning moment of the day, that balcony picture. It's an advert for blended families. It's also sort of an advert for broken families in the sense that there were two
The
spares.
people who weren't there.
Yeah, what did you make of Prince Harry's general performance yesterday?
Well, we all worried about Prince Harry coming, but he wasn't stuck behind a pillar. He was stuck behind Princess Anne's rather large hat, but I think that was an accident. Let's pretend it was an accident.
Yes.
But
it's
he was
interesting that when the Duchess of Sussex was at, was it the Platinum Jubilee?
Yes.
She was behind a candle.
She was.
I mean, these things are meticulously planned, but perhaps not that much, Eve, I don't know.
I don't know whether they're making thicker candles now either. But he was talking, he was having a chat, a really good chat with Jack Brooksbanks, Eugenie's husband.
I know.
And they obviously get on very well. And so that was fun. He looked very, very unhappy, I thought, when he walked into the Abbey. But then he saw somebody and said hello.
Yes.
And then he sat down and he was fine.
Apparently that was a military person. It was one of the recipients of Victoria or George's Cross.
But that's,
somebody told
but
me,
that's
which is
good.
nice.
That's brilliant.
But
and
you
then,
don't want to be... Do you want to be in the cheap seats with Jack Brooksbank when
Well,
you're the son of a newly crowned
But Jack
king?
Brooksbanks, well, what was sad is, wouldn't it have been a magical moment if he had come up and kissed his father in the way that William did so beautifully, and his father said, "Thank you, William," with a really nice little face on, I thought. I think that would have been a trip too far. I mean, he says his brother and his father are trapped in being royal. Well, I know who I felt was trapped yesterday.
Yes.
It was Harry.
It was Harry. And off he went. He's waving and smiling at Heathrow Airport, flying back to Montecito.
Rushing to a 4-year-old's birthday.
Well, hang on. I mean, shouldn't we be rushing to 4-year-olds' birthdays?
Well, we should rush to our own 4-year-olds.
Yes.
Absolutely. You're not quite so keen on some other people's.
But gone in 28 hours. I mean, also
And
the
he'll
disconnect.
feel like hell.
The comms disconnect was exemplified by the lip readers saying that even Brooksbank didn't really know how long he was staying and when he was leaving. So clearly there'd been no communication at all between the Montecito side of things and the monarchy side of things.
And of course, I can't think of a good reason for him to come back to Britain. I mean, last year we had a lot of, we had the wonderful thing that the Queen had. I can't remember the name.
The Jubilee.
Jubilee.
That's it.
Right. And then we had, sadly,
It's been a long week, Eve.
to some, and it's very sadly the funeral. I can't think of a royal thing in the calendar that means he has to come back this year. And the more they never get together, the longer this will go on.
Should we just quickly mention the Duke of York in these garter robes? He's perfectly entitled to wear them because although he's been stripped of his military and royal patronages, he hasn't been stripped of this Order of the Garter.
No.
Should he be in the robes? I mean, it looks like the King's sort of softened on him slightly.
Well, I think probably somebody said, and there probably is a rule saying he has them, he's not been removed from them, so he wore them. But of course, I didn't hear it, but I'm told he was heckled as he came down the Mall.
Yes, he was booed, which is probably poor form.
Yes.
Having said that, we did see the very best of British yesterday, Eve, as is ever the case. People in their ponchos. I liked a lady I saw who was in a Union Jack poncho. You can't get better than that.
Yes.
And I suppose the point is really, did the palace slightly undercook this? Because it was all rather apologetic and, oh, turn out if you want to, but we really don't mind. And if you want to pledge allegiance, you can, but you don't have to.
Well, the pledging allegiance thing was much too far. I think everybody would have stood up and said, God save the King. Any more, most of us can't remember. I think the palace played it quite right. It was a very, very diverse crowd in the Abbey.
Yes.
Probably will have upset some people, but will have made a lot of people think, he's my king. I've seen somebody who looks like me in the Abbey.
Yes.
I've seen someone who's done great works in the Abbey. I've seen the leaders of all these faiths in the Abbey, and I think it probably homogenised the whole thing.
And I love the fact that the British spirit wasn't dampened by the rain. I mean, it rained at the last two coronations, so, you know,
so
that's
it's on, obviously.
Let's just have a final word about the unexpected star of the day.
Oh, yes.
Penny Mordaunt.
Penny Mordaunt, centre stage, holding a sword, looking regal. I mean, that's the only way.
She had done press-ups to prepare for that sword holding, apparently.
I imagine so. It was probably very heavy.
She looked like the female equivalent of Robin Hood, or...
Well, what she looked was solid, and we're so used to women in the news having to be thin and rakish and all the rest of it. And she was a real woman.
But
I mean,
she upstaged
her.
all of the politicians.
She did.
And she was there at every turn. Oh, there's Penny Mordaunt.
Can you imagine how annoyed some of those politicians were watching the telly?
Rishi looked rather glum and sidelined by comparison. Are we having buyer's remorse?
I don't know, but apparently she went to the dressing up box for that job, and of course it had never been done by a woman before, and she's going to put that outfit in the box, hoping another woman will do that role for another coronation.
Another buxom woman will do that role in that dress.
Let's hope.
Eve Pollard, you are a legend. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Lovely to see you. Now, Will Hollis is in Lutterworth, Leicestershire, where we hope a street party is about to commence or already commenced. Will, tell us, who have you got coming up in the People's Panel and what would they like me to ask my guests?
Good morning. Yes, you can just see behind me here in Lutterworth, a sleepy little town in South Leicestershire. Not going to be very sleepy today because the whole High Street is closed off. A lot of people haven't arrived yet because the party starts at 11, but we do have our People's Panel. We've got three people that make things happen here in Lutterworth. We've got Graham, Rachel and Tony. We've got Camilla Tominey back in the GBNews. Been speaking to people all about the coronation. That's what we're going to be talking about as well today. What was the thing that stood out for you, Graham?
Well, I love the pageantry and Will kissing his dad. I think totally awesome.
Graham, you're talking about how the young people in Lutterworth have been celebrating a little bit later. Rachel, you also make things happen here in Lutterworth. You also manage events for community groups. It was quite a big event yesterday. Is that something that you'd understand how to manage?
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to begin, I don't think. We had all sorts of community groups getting ready this week and they've had their own sub-events. But I can imagine in the royal household there's been one or two sleepless nights and a few people a little bit greyer this morning.
Fantastic. Tony, you're the chair of the local museum. What stood out to you yesterday?
Well, I think the fact that we actually can do pomp and circumstance better than anybody else in the world, and it really was a special pageant event.
And you're a historian. You probably remember 70 years ago when we last saw a coronation for the Queen. How do you think this coronation compared for King Charles III?
Oh, I think an awful lot has changed since then. I mean, we've got countries queuing to come out of the Commonwealth. We have got much more opposition to the royalty than we had before. But as I say, the thing that brought it off more than anything was just the pomp and circumstance.
Fantastic. We are sticking around here all day. We aren't going anywhere, and the views aren't going to be going So we'll be listening to your programme, hearing what other people have to say, and then we'll be talking about it in an hour or two.
For that, Will, in Lutterworth. Lovely to see people preparing for a street party. Now, former Justice Secretary and first man to be knighted by Charles after he became king joins me now, Robert Buckland. Lovely to see you, Sir Robert.
Lovely to be here.
I must call you that. Now, tell me, what was it like to be the first man to be knighted by King Charles III?
Well, I thought it would be, just a wonderful day, but a normal investiture, and then to hear that it was the king was a big thrill for me and my parents and my son. And because of the order in which things were done, I happened to be the first bloke who was being dealt with. Lady Sainsbury had the DBE first, quite right too, and then I was the number 2. And it dawned upon me that I was the first man to be knighted by the king as king.
And did he say something to you? Did you have a little chat?
Oh yes, we have our chats when we see each other, and I have to say that I think nobody is better prepared to be king than this monarch. It's not just a question of waiting. He's prepared for this, and I get the sense that there is a serious sense of purpose. He's taking the job incredibly seriously.
I mean, we saw that yesterday. He looked so solemn, didn't
well, he
he?
did, and it's a solemn ceremony. It's a religious ceremony laden with huge symbolism, that has been laid down through the centuries. Of course, you're going to take it seriously. But what I like about the king is that he's also able to not to take himself seriously and laugh at things and have
Same
that.
with the Queen Camilla, actually. They take the work seriously, but not themselves.
Yes, and that sense of humour, I think, carries them through their onerous public duties. I mean, who'd want that job?
No.
It's a job like no other, and it's a job that he's now, I think, ideally equipped to do.
I mean, you're a long-standing politician. Does it matter that he has expressed some pseudo-political views in the past, that we know what he thinks about all manner of things, be it architecture, the built environment, the environment in general? I mean, it's different to the Queen's approach, the late Queen's approach, isn't it?
Well, yes, but before he became king, he was interviewed some years ago in which he clearly stated that he knew that the job of being king was somewhat different from his previous role, and I think he accepted that, he acknowledged that, and everything that he's doing shows that he understands that the role of a constitutional monarch is a limited one, inevitably, but there are important functions. I think Bagehot described it in the 19th century as to encourage, to advise and to warn, and I'm sure that when it comes to this Prime Minister and future Prime Ministers, that's what the King will do.
And what's all this we hear about? A little bit of argy-bargy over who was invited yesterday, Robert. One former cabinet minister's there, one isn't. Boris Johnson and Carrie are front row. Some members of the cabinet are sat further back. Was there a little bit of competition over these invitations?
Well, look, I think a lot of us felt that we'd love to have been there, but there were only 2,000 seats.
So was it wrong? Should all of the MPs in the House of Commons have been there?
Well, look, in 1953 there were 8,000 seats, but they built tiers and stadiums. If you look at Westminster Abbey, then they closed it for 6 months to rebuild it into some sort of Wembley Stadium. Clearly, that wasn't going to be possible this time, and therefore I think we all have to accept that it's right for the Buckingham Palace to make sure, and the Earl Marshal, to make sure there's a very good cross-representation of our society, and I think yesterday that was achieved in spades. You look at that congregation, and I thought there was a great sort of sense that civic society and people more generally were being well represented across the country and through all the organisations that were there in the Abbey, and that's fine. And none of us should carp and quibble about that. This is a state occasion, showing Britain off to the world. I thought we did it very well.
And do you think it perhaps sets the Republican cause back a bit? We have seen quite a lot of polling this week. We know about the protests, which I'm going to ask you about in your capacity as a former Justice Secretary in just a moment. But obviously there's a kind of rising Republican sentiment among the under-30s, and that's been problematic for the monarchy in the past and could continue to be so. Do displays like this perhaps push the dial back in their favour?
I think they do. I think none of us, apart from our parents' and grandparents' generation, have seen a coronation. It was a great moment for people to actually view the symbolism and what it's all about. And I think that will have convinced a lot of people that whilst there are quirks and imperfections quite clearly in a constitutional monarchy, what's the alternative? President Blair?
Yes.
I think not.
President Lineker?
I think not.
But why are the Tories a bit shy about all this? You know, meant to be the party of patriotism. You've got people in the opposition who want to scrap the monarchy. Surely you should be waving the Union flag at every opportunity because of the representation here indicating that the not just silent majority, the cheering majority are in favour of this institution.
Well, yeah, do you know, I think actually not just the Conservative Party, but mainstream politics is in favour of the monarchy, and I think it has more power when actually it's people from all parties who are standing up and saying this works, why change it? This represents not just our great history, but it's also a sustainable model for the future.
Yes.
And I think that sort of cross-party support, that wellspring of support for the monarchy will endure, and that's why yesterday was another great milestone in the history of this institution.
Yes.
But looking forward, I think, to, God willing, a successful reign and a great future with His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales.
Now, not everybody was in support. There was quite a few protests yesterday. People perfectly entitled to protest, I think, in a fair and open democracy.
Yes.
There were some arrests, more than 50, and Graham Smith, the head of Republic, the anti-monarchy campaign group, ended up being thrown in the back of a police van. What do we think? Do we think the police were a bit too heavy-handed? They were in Trafalgar Square. There was an issue over a megaphone that Graham planned to use, and also I think some clips on their clothing which were meant to be used for holding banners, but in fact the police misconstrued as perhaps them trying to chain themselves to railings. Over the top, or?
Well, look, you told me more than I knew before I came into the studio. I think the police have a very difficult job on the ground in operations to judge what might happen and what might not happen. Can you imagine what would have happened if they'd done nothing and then we'd had some obstruction on the parade or worse?
But where's the line drawn between
difficult.
peaceful protests? I mean, does a megaphone change the situation? He's allowed to go in Trafalgar Square and shout against the monarchy on a megaphone, isn't he?
Well, yes, absolutely. And when
Same
you look
as Steve Bray's been doing it for years.
And when you look at the legislation, you've got inbuilt to it the fact that police have to take into account freedom of expression and weigh all these things up, this important right that we all have, before taking action. Now,
but the Tories have been blamed for being overzealous with this legislation on protest. Do you think they're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut here?
No, I supported this legislation. In fact, I was the minister who helped put it through, and I think it was absolutely right we did so. Because I can tell you, we'd be up to for a lot of criticism. The police would be in the dock if they let something happen and the parade was obstructed, or worse, horses were frightened.
No, I know.
We can't. That's not safe.
Before you go, with time ticking, I must ask you about the local election results. I mean, the expectation management was at 1,000 because CCHQ obviously hoped it would be well below that. In fact, the losses of seats across England exceeded 1,000. It's an absolute disaster for the Tories, isn't it, Robert?
Well, look, it was a very bad day. I'm not going to gloss over it. I've seen days like this before, and I've seen how the Conservative Party learns and recovers from it. That's the key thing now. We've got to listen to what people are saying to us. We've got to do better, and we've got to press on. I think Rishi's getting it right.
But
we
if
need
the swing
to press
that happened
on in the fight against inflation.
on a local level was reciprocated when it comes to the general election, you'd lose your seat.
Well, I know that.
Do you think you're going to lose your seat?
No, I don't, because
you worried about it?
Of course I do, but I've never been complacent about my seat. I've never had a safe seat. You know, my seat is a marginal one, always has been, which is why I work year in, year out with local residents to try and solve their problems and try and be a vigorous representative.
CCHQ up to scratch? Because I heard a lot of anecdotal evidence last week that the Tories weren't campaigning hard enough in key areas.
Well, locally we were working very, very hard on the ground. I think, just as we're learning lessons, I'm sure CCHQ will as well, and we'll be ready for that general election when it comes next year.
So, Robert Buckland, very, very much wonderful to see you this morning. We might see you again later, but we'll keep that slightly secret. Now, lots more to come. After the break, I'm going to be speaking to Labour's Wes Streeting. I'll also be speaking to the Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, about everything involved in planning for the coronation, and I'll be joined by the late Queen's Press Secretary, Elsa Anderson. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess I've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Buckingham Palace for this Camilla Tominey Show Coronation Special. We've still got lots to come. In just a minute, I'm going to be speaking to Elsa Anderson, who served as Queen Elizabeth II's press secretary. I'm also going to be heading to a street party in Leicestershire for the People's Panel. And I'm going to be hearing from both the government and Labour for some reaction to Thursday's local election results. But first, here's the news with Ray Addison.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Coronation celebrations are continuing today as thousands of people across the country prepare to hold a coronation big lunch. The Prime Minister and his wife are hosting one in Downing Street with volunteers, Ukrainian refugees and the First Lady of the United States expected to attend. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh will join a big lunch in Cranley in Surrey, and Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie will take part in one in Windsor. Buckingham Palace is calling the lunches a nationwide act of celebration and friendship. Well, the Metropolitan Police is facing criticism for arresting 52 people on the day of the coronation. The force says they were taken into custody for an array of offences, including conspiracy to cause a public nuisance. Graham Smith, the chief executive of anti-monarchy group Republic, was held for nearly 16 hours. He says there's no longer a right to peaceful protest in the UK. However, the Met says the arrests were made in a proportionate manner in line with relevant legislation. Later on this evening, 20,000 people will join the newly crowned King and Queen at Windsor Castle for the coronation concert. Take That, Katy Perry and Lionel Richie will all be performing, with special appearances from Tom Cruise, Dame Joan Collins and Sir Tom Jones. As part of the concert, light displays will be lit over historic landmarks, including Blackpool's seafront, Gateshead's Millennium Bridge and the Eden Project in Cornwall. These people in Windsor told us they're looking forward to it.
It's been very special. It's not normally quite as jolly and full of bunting as this, but it's been great to see people from across the globe come to our town.
We're from Thailand, It's very nice to be part of this, and we like to see everyone celebrating, of course, for the king, and he has been waiting for so long.
There's expected, I think, 20,000 or 40,000, I have no idea, but it's going to be really busy.
Prince Harry has arrived back in California less than 24 hours after his father's coronation. The Duke of Sussex caught a British Airways flight just hours after the service to return home to celebrate his son's 4th birthday. Yesterday marked his first public appearance alongside his family since the release of his controversial memoir, Spare. Well, thousands of Liverpool fans booed the national anthem before kick-off against Brentford yesterday. God Save the King was played at all Premier League grounds to celebrate the coronation, but some people in the stands at Anfield chanted and jeered during it. The club's manager, Jurgen Klopp, defended the fans, saying that they do have a right to free speech. And at least 8 people have been killed and 7 wounded in the United States after a man opened fire at a mall near Dallas, Texas. The gunman, who authorities think acted alone, was killed by a police officer. The injured include a 5-year-old child, and 3 people are said to be in a critical condition. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Camilla.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, Coronation Special, live from Buckingham Palace. I'm going to be speaking to Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, in just a moment. Lucy Fraser, the Culture Secretary, also joins me. And I'll be speaking to Elsa Anderson, the late Queen's Press Secretary. Now, before Wes Streeting gets mic'd up, we're waiting for him to come on. I'm going to bring Eve Pollard back into the conversation. We didn't get to speak about the local election results, Eve. They are in the papers. They were on the front of The Observer, who used the photograph of the King but wanted to zone in on the political scene. I mean, have the Tories dodged a bullet slightly in that nobody's talking about these disastrous results? They're actually just talking about the King and Queen?
I think they've delayed it by 24, maybe 48 hours. In the end, we will have to go back to reality. This has been a glorious scene. But the fact is, the Tories didn't do very well. Labour did quite well. The Greens did extraordinarily well. Lib Dems pushed ahead a bit.
But does the Green vote indicate a protest vote? I mean, part of the problem, it wasn't so much a Labour success as a Tory disaster.
Correct.
The Labour Party needed about a 10% swing to translate into a majority in the Commons come 2024. They actually just got 5%. So it wasn't a ringing endorsement of Sir Keir Starmer, was it?
No, it wasn't. And of course, you're quite right. Is the Green vote, and is perhaps sometimes the Lib Dem vote, a protest vote that says, I'm not happy with what's going on? Change the record, really.
Yes. Do you think people are enthused by Rishi Sunak? It was interesting. My editor was in the coronation ceremony yesterday, and he said the only politician that really turned heads again is Boris Johnson. Everyone was craning to have a look at him and Carrie coming in because he's got that wow factor. You've got Sunak steadying the ship, but I don't know. Both leaders, I think, people find rather unconvincing.
I think that Boris is the great showman, but that didn't work. And Rishi doesn't have an ounce of showmanship in him. And I think we'd like to see him more. We'd like to... I mean, he vanished for the first 2 months.
But he was working hard behind the scenes.
He was, and
Hard
he was
work
getting...
does
Hard work does get, like, the Northern Protocol and all the rest, North Ireland Protocol. But you need somebody to be there. And it's very difficult because he is a details man, and you do respect that. And he does get some things sorted out. And he's working very hard, as we know, on little boats coming over,
Yes.
trying to get the economy going.
Yes.
But on the other hand, there are things that are driving people mad, like why can't we be a place that people come and buy their Chanel bags and
Yes.
save money and
Oh,
bring
the
a load more
VAT
tourists?
thing, yep.
Madness. I
It
mean,
seems
and
to
why
be
does everything take...
anti-business, the environment, that's
Correct,
the problem.
and business, and also everything seems to take so long. I don't know whether he's got enough people to delegate, enough people to get on with it, but I don't seem to think that... You don't feel they've realised there's urgency about it.
But then the trouble with... Oh, have we got Wes? I think we have got Wes now. I think Wes Streeting, the Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, does join us now. Wes, thank you very much for joining the show this morning. I'd love to know what you made of the coronation. Presumably you were glued to the ceremony as the rest of us were, Wes.
Yeah, sorry I'm running a bit late this morning. It's been a bit back-to-back. Wasn't avoiding you, but I was actually there. It was an amazing occasion. I felt very privileged. A small number of MPs from each party were able to be at the coronation itself. And it was just remarkable, to be honest. And at a time when lots of things in our country aren't working, it was great to see on display so many things that make this country great. The music, that even talking about it's given me goosebumps. The huge military processions down the Mall, the fly past, the coming together, the people packing the Mall, and I'm going to be out at street parties in my constituency in the next day or two as well. I hope the weather holds up. I thought it was brilliant, actually. It's wonderful, and the fact that I think 300 million people tuned in worldwide is a reminder of the soft power that the monarchy brings our country, and I genuinely don't think we would have seen something like that with a presidential election, for example.
Wes, doesn't it also show, though, how out of touch some of the Republicans in your party are? They're not very in tune with the public if they want to scrap a monarchy that literally millions of people turned out for in the Mall behind me.
They're also not very great in number, to be honest, and I say that with respect. And look, it's perfectly legitimate for people to say, oh, I'd want a republic, I'd want an elected head of state. It's not a view I agree with. It's not one the Labour Party agrees with. I mean, people should look back at where Attlee was. You know, we're in politics because we want to change people's lives. And I don't think people's lives would change for the better with an elected head of state. I think one of the things that the royal family is able to do is to bridge divides, actually, and we saw that yesterday with people coming together on a cross-party basis. I mean, you know, Penny Mordaunt almost stole the show as the sword bearer yesterday. With that, and, you know, people
Yes.
right across party boundaries were very praising of Penny, actually, and very proud of the way she conducted herself. But more than that, I mean, you know, I mentioned the Abbey. One of the nice things about yesterday was talking to people from all walks of life who were invited because of their community service, because of their public service, what they do for other people. And that was lovely. And, you know, ask anyone who's ever been to a royal visit or to a Buckingham Palace garden party. Those are really special moments that people remember for the rest of their lives. And I think there is that kind of stardust and magic you get around monarchy that you wouldn't get from an elected head of state.
Obviously, there are some who don't like the royal family. Monarchy isn't their cup of tea. What did you make, Wes, of the policing of the protesters yesterday? The CEO of Republic, the anti-monarchy campaign group, Graham Smith, got arrested. Did you think it was a bit overzealous? Well,
I don't know the circumstances of the arrest, and I think it's important. I've seen some of the statements coming out from the Metropolitan Police. I'm glad that they've recognised the importance of transparency and public accountability as the Metropolitan Police tries to rebuild trust after some pretty terrible headlines driven by even more shocking reports of misconduct. I think the police will reflect on yesterday and be open about what went well and what could have gone better, and we'll wait and see that. They recognise the public accountability. I don't doubt that yesterday was an enormous policing challenge, and not least because of the security risk of having so many dignitaries and heads of state and representatives from around the world coming together in one place. It was no mean feat. And so, look, I don't think anyone is ever comfortable really with the idea of protesters being arrested unless it's, of course, justified. So the police will want to do that stuff around accountability. Let's wait and see what they say in terms of any arrests that took place. I actually think it's a great strength of our country that you had on the Mall thousands of people packing the Mall to celebrate the coronation, and literally a stone's throw away in Trafalgar Square you had people voicing their views for Republic and I don't think with any arrests there, and I think that's a great thing about a democracy. We can disagree, and we can disagree well.
Let's talk about democracy and local democracy, Wes. Now, the election results have been good for Labour, there's no denying that, but have they been good enough? You needed a 10% swing to make you the majority party in Parliament come 2024. You actually only got 5%. So what's gone wrong? You haven't done as well as you should have.
Camilla, Keir could literally be in the car to Downing Street as the Prime Minister of a majority Labour government, and people will still be saying, oh, difficult night for the Conservatives, but Labour could have done better. I think we had some remarkable results, the biggest swing since 1997. But I will just make this point. We're confident we can win it. We're confident we can win a majority at the next election, but we're not complacent. We know, of course, there's more to do. But if you'd told me in 2019, after the worst election defeat since 1935, that we'd be seeing the kind of breakthroughs that we saw in every part of England, every corner of the country, I'm not sure I would have believed you, actually. And I'm, as you know, I'm always an optimist. But it's remarkable progress. But we're not taking people for granted. There is more to do. And for Labour, in terms of our manifesto, the best is yet to come.
Isn't the truth, Wes, that you're going to have to borrow my bright yellow jacket and go into coalition with the Lib Dems to have any hope of Keir Starmer being Prime Minister in 2024?
I know that's what the Conservatives are going around saying, because their position on their results seems to be, oh, we didn't just lose seats to Labour, we lost seats to everyone, as if that was some sort of achievement on their part. I don't think that we're in that territory of looking to or needing a coalition. I do know that Conservatives are in trouble.
Would you go into coalition with the Lib Dems?
They are losing. We're not in that space, and we're not interested in a coalition with the Liberal Democrats. What we are working to is delivering a majority Labour government, and it's not just in England where we're winning back support. In Scotland too, where there weren't local elections on Thursday, but Labour is making serious ground under Anas Sarwar's leadership in Scotland, particularly given the SNP implosion. I think people in Scotland are now not just looking to Labour as a potential government in Westminster to get the Tories out, they're looking to Labour as a serious alternative for government in Scotland too, because they can compare Labour's record in government with the Tories' 13 years in Westminster and the SNP's 16 years in Scotland.
It's a great advert for your party. You're always a champion. I've got to grant it to you. Wes Streeting, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Now, let's hear from the Conservative view of things. Lucy Fraser, the Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, the Tory MP for South East Cambridgeshire, joins me here. Thank you very much for coming to see us today. It's a bit chilly. You're looking gorgeous in your pink dress. I know we need blankets. This is the trouble with an outdoor broadcast. Now, you're at the coronation yesterday. Of course you would be as Culture Secretary. Tell us all about it. Where were you seated? What was the highlight for you, Lucy?
Oh, it was such a phenomenal event. I mean, this was Britain on the world stage, and we did a fantastic spectacle that no one like Britain can do. It was. I thought the coronation itself, the service, the whole event was really spectacular.
What was your favourite part?
So there were so many bits, because that was like true tradition, which was fantastic to see. I really enjoyed the procession coming into the Abbey, because we saw Princess Princess Charlotte holding Prince Louis's hand and her looking after him. That was fantastic. But at the same time, we saw religious leaders, heads of state wearing their traditional clothes. And I just thought it was a fantastic celebration and a moment of international unity.
And obviously DCMS were absolutely central to the planning. You pleased with how it went? I mean, it went without a hitch, I think, from your perspective.
Yes.
There was a bit of a problem with the timings. I think the King arrived 6 minutes too early at the Abbey. Did it matter?
I don't think it mattered. You're right, my department has done a huge amount of work to ensure that the coronation went smoothly. And I think I was so proud when I was there, sitting there. I was proud to be British. And I know a lot of people felt that too.
Now,
and I think it went well.
Were you proud to be a Tory woman observing your friend and colleague, Penny Mordaunt? Tell us about how she prepared for that. And did politicians realise, because the public didn't, that she would play such a central role?
I thought she did an amazing job. She was so fabulous. So I spoke to her before it actually, and so I knew she was playing an important role, and she was there for the whole time. But I didn't appreciate how heavy the sword would be, you know, what exercises she'd had to have done in order to ensure she could do that. But I thought she did a fantastic job.
Yeah, you won't be taking her on in an arm wrestling contest
Absolutely
at Tory
not.
HQ anytime soon.
No, definitely not.
And what did you think about the police handling of the protesters? There were over 50 arrests. Graham Smith, the head of Republic, as we've said already, he got arrested by police. A bit over the top. There have been concerns about the Conservatives' policies on protests, that this new legislation, it's a sledgehammer to crack a nut, that you're actually impinging on people's right and freedom to campaign against things like the monarchy.
So you will know that the police are operationally independent.
Yes.
And you mentioned the legislation we brought through. I think it's absolutely right that we did that. I think we've seen a shift in recent years in how people are protesting. It's absolutely right. People have a right to protest. We live in a democracy. It's an important part of our democracy. But what we've seen is them disrupting day-to-day operations of people's lives, you know, stopping them going to hospital, stopping them going to school, you know, stopping them using major motorways and commuting to work. And I think we need to redress that balance, and that's why we've brought in legislation. We brought in some legislation, and the police said they needed more powers, so we've given them and I think then the police have to use their operational powers, their intelligence, to make the right decisions and the right calls on the day.
I'm really interested in your take on the royals as a family. You've obviously got a front row seat yesterday. How was Prince Harry received as he entered the Abbey?
I think what was fabulous about that event is that it was a huge family moment. It wasn't just Prince Harry, but obviously there was Queen Camilla's family there, as well as the royal family, the King's family.
Yes.
And I think that was lovely to see.
And did you think the balcony show, that idea actually of it being representative of blended families in Britain, is a good thing? I mean, we've commented with some of the other contributors today that back in the 90s, the idea of Queen Camilla would have been anathema to a lot of people, and now here she is with the crown on her head alongside the King. Is that an image that you thought we'd ever see in our lifetimes?
I think what we see, and what we saw in so many different aspects of the coronation, was tradition at the same time as modernity. And I think that the King really wanted to ensure that was the case. So there were some changes to the service, bringing it more up to date, specifically, for example, in relation to religious leaders. We had chairs that were restored, that had been part of previous coronations. We had both songs that had been part of the coronation since the coronation first took place, as well as new songs as well. So the anthem, which was composed by Andrew Lloyd Webber. So I think what we saw today is a monarchy that understands tradition, but also understands that it needs to keep pace with modern time.
You've mentioned keeping pace. Are you keeping pace with your own voters? Because the local elections, let's be honest, have been a disaster for the Conservatives. The damage limitation was that you'd lose 1,000 seats. You've lost more than that, and presumably you were hoping to lose fewer. What's gone wrong?
Well, first of all, I'd say it's really sad to see local councillors who've worked really hard for their local communities.
Of course, but
whether they're Conservatives or Labour, lose their seat. Look, I'm not going to pretend that wasn't a difficult result for us as Conservatives, but we've been in power for 13 years. And we've got to think about the context in which that local election took place. And the context is we've just come out of a pandemic. People are struggling with the cost of living. We're still in a war with Ukraine, which we are quite rightly
a
supporting.
Conservative government should be well placed to provide solutions to those problems, and actually people think you're being unconservative, not least with your high tax policies, not least with your business taxes. We've had complaints about the VAT on luxury goods in London particularly. So there's a sense that you're not really doing what you should do, not doing what you say on the tin, that that's why you're losing support. There's even a story in The Observer to say that you're losing support among Brexiteers in the Red Wall. That suggests, along with the likes of losing Windsor, that it's all going very, very badly wrong for you.
I think we are doing what people want us to do. And
But you can't be, Lucy, because they're not voting for you in the locals.
Well, I think we've had a really difficult few years. I'm not going to pretend that the last few years haven't been very challenging for the party. But now I think we have some stability. So the Prime Minister has been in place for only 6 months. And I think he is focusing on, rightly, the things that people are talking to us about on the doorstep. And the biggest thing that people are finding difficulty with is the cost of living. And so what the Prime Minister is focusing on, quite rightly, is inflation. Well, the biggest tax cut that we can give people is to get inflation under control, because that affects them on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, he wants to halve it by the end of the year, and it's not quite coming down as fast as it should. Meanwhile, people are facing sky-high prices in the supermarkets. Food inflation is much higher than 10%. It's about 25%. So when's this all going to be happening?
So we have seen inflation come down, and it is projected.
Not enough, though.
Well, it's projected to fall to just over 2.9% by the end of the year. So I think then people will see a change in their day-to-day living. I think what we need to do is make sure that we deliver on those promises that we've made, and I think we've started to deliver. And I must say, just knocking on doors throughout the local election campaign, I do feel that people are starting to give us the opportunity to show them that we can deliver. And I think when we have, I think then we earn the right for them to trust us.
Rishi Sunak only went to Darlington, which is about 5 minutes from his own constituency in Richmond. Why didn't he travel more? There's criticisms of CCHQ not campaigning hard enough in the areas that you really need to win. Why are you having a lacklustre response to what is a real crisis in your party and in government?
Well, I would refute that we're not campaigning hard. I think we campaigned very strongly throughout the country, and it was great to see the Prime Minister and his wife out on the campaign trail.
The campaign was launched in secret in Wolverhampton. The media weren't even invited. Lots of people didn't even know that you were campaigning. So, you know, we go to villages, we see it with our own eyes. It's kind of, there's painted with a sea of yellow, like my jacket by the Lib Dems. The Tories are invisible. That's not good campaigning.
I would totally refute that. I think we were fighting on the ground, and that's what's important. What we need to do in an election is talk to people, and I went to a number of constituencies, not just my own, during the course of the campaign. You're wearing your yellow jacket. My constituency was at risk from a Lib Dem threat. I think they thought they would take it. They did not. We still control the council. So I think on the ground, I think we've seen, in different areas of the country, great local campaigns.
OK, Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser, thank you so much for joining me, not least after such a busy day yesterday. Lovely to see you.
Thank you, nice to see you.
Well, let's go back to Will Hollis now, who's at a street party in Lutterworth. The sun is shining in Leicestershire. I hope, Will, what have the panel made of what they've seen on the programme and indeed what they've seen this weekend?
Good morning. Yes, we're still here in Lutterworth in South Leicestershire. You can see right the way down to the end of the high street, there's a whole row of tables for the street party, empty right now, but this table, of course, is very full because this is where our People's Panel are, and they're full of opinions. We've got Tony, who's the chair of the local Lutterworth Museum. We've got Rachel, who manages events for the community, and Graham, you're the chaplain at the local college. Graham, today and hearing about on Camilla's programme is Prince Harry. He came from America and then he headed off there straight away. Was it right for him to come, or could he just do no wrong and either way he'd get in trouble for it?
Well, I think people are gunning for him, yeah, but I think it's entirely up to him. It's a family situation, let them sort it out, and whatever he did, that's what he wanted to do. It's fine with me.
Rachel, were you all for seeing Harry there, or is it the right thing for him to do to come along to his dad's coronation?
I think he pitched it just right. I was glad that he didn't try and kind of steal the headlines and the media and detract focus from the rest of the family who were there to do a job, as well as support their kind of dad. But he also didn't grab headlines by not being there. So I think it was about the right level.
It was really the other brother was grabbing the headlines, particularly with that photo and that oath that he made to his father. Do we see brother being put against brother here, or is this just part of what happens with families?
Well, I think it certainly happens with most families. The problem is the book. I think the book opened up so many rifts between them. And whereas obviously his father was pleased to see him there, I'm not sure the rift between him and William will be healed anytime soon.
The other headline that we've been hearing about was at the start of the coronation, pull away from Buckingham Palace, was of course the protest. Protests, are they good things even if it means that we're protesting on the day of a coronation? Is it the right thing for democracy? And how did you feel seeing some of those protesters being taken away in the back of a police van?
Well, at the event, I didn't see any of that because that wasn't seen. I think it's right that people can protest. Has to be. We are a democracy, and I think that's massively important. I have no more opinion on that. I don't know how many people were doing what. I know that, like you say, there were arrests, but it did not spoil the event at all. And I was amazed, actually, miles of road, and yet nobody came out, nobody spooked any horses, you know, and the thing wasn't damaged.
Well, hopefully there's going to be no protests here in Lutterworth. We're going to go back to you now, Camilla, but full of opinions here on the People's Panel in Lutterworth in Leicestershire.
Lovely to hear from lovely Lutterworth. Thank you very much for that, Will. Now, lots still to come on the show. Live from Buckingham Palace, I'm going to be speaking to the late Queen's former press secretary. We'll be back very soon. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, a coronation special live from Buckingham Palace. Now, I've got the best guest, because Ailsa Anderson wasn't only Communications Secretary to the late Queen, but she was also Director of Communications to Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury. So presumably, Ailsa, you were looking at this from both angles yesterday. Tell me, what were your highlights of the ceremony?
Oh, my golly, Camilla, there were so many. I have to say, yeah, I thought the Archbishop was 10 out of 10.
Yes, he didn't
in terms
put
of
a foot wrong.
He was, and I know he would have been worried. I know he would have been praying the night before.
Yes.
And having his own personal space to, to ensure that everything went well. And he would rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. He's a perfectionist, like the King. They're both perfectionists.
Yes.
And it was interesting. I saw one of the headlines saying, basically, well done us, didn't we do well? The King would not have ever said that. He would be worrying about, tiny bits that may have gone wrong.
Yes.
Have I let anyone down? Have I delivered for the public? I am here.
Is that how he thinks?
Yes, I do think. He said yesterday, I am here to serve. I'm here not to be served upon. And that was very similar to the Archbishop's sermon yesterday as well. So it's very much about service, community, what I can give to you rather than what you can give to me, which I think is, especially in today's society, I think that's just so key.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you say there wasn't a hitch. There was a slight hitch, which you must have noticed as well, because I'm very familiar with how you all plan things. You just have those little books, they're down to the last minute.
Absolutely.
What happened? The Diamond Jubilee State Coach arrives at Westminster Abbey, and then he's held in a fixed point for 5 minutes. You can see the door opening. He has a chat with the Crown Equerry. He doesn't look too happy, Ailsa. How does this happen? I thought these things were planned to the very second.
Well, never work with children and animals, I think, Camilla, is the key there. And you're dealing with horses. And you say he didn't look too happy. I just think he was nervous, and he's had a lot on his mind. Because I think I've said to you before, what members of the royal family normally like more than anything is a hitch to happen, is something that's not going to go according to plan, something that's going to be amusing that they can talk about afterwards. So I think it would be more, not an annoyance, but actually, the eyes of the world are on us. We've got to make sure this is absolutely perfection, minute by minute. And obviously it wasn't, but I'm sure they will laugh about it in retrospect.
Now, obviously, you worked in very close quarters with the couple. Can you just give us your impressions of them as individuals? I know it's a professional working relationship, but you must have got to know them relatively well. What's the King like? What's the Queen like?
I think the King has that sense of extraordinary duty that he got from his mother. I think he's kind, he's generous, he's thoughtful, he's spiritual. You hear the stories that never get publicised. Andrew Lloyd Webber said yesterday that he sent him 2 personal letters.
Yes.
When his son died recently, there was a royal photographer whose wife died last year, and again the King and the Queen sent personal letters of condolence, which are never publicised, but it's just those little things that people don't hear about, which show actually they've got a huge heart and they're incredibly compassionate. What I love about the Queen is her extraordinary warmth. Yes. And she's so down to earth, and I think she wasn't born to this life, and yet she has grown into it. I love the causes that she champions. Children's literature, domestic abuse on women, is things that are maybe not too sexy in the eyes of the media, but actually she has put a spotlight on those, and she's giving them the publicity that they really need.
You mentioned the media there. Obviously, you're a communications guru, and I was going to ask you about the PR effort to restore the reputations of Charles and Camilla. We can think back to the 90s, particularly the Queen was public enemy #1. There is something slightly surreal about seeing them both wearing crowns on the balcony behind us. Is that because of an enormous PR effort, or is it because of who they are as individuals and people actually going, do you know what? It might have not been the perfect and most auspicious start. They don't want to be disloyal to Princess Diana, but at the same time, this couple have grown on people.
I think nobody knows what goes on inside a marriage, Camilla. I'm divorced, no one knows, so, and people are very, very quick to judge. So there are always 2 sides of every story. Was it a deliberate, proactive media campaign? I wasn't around then, I don't know. I can only say what I see for them as individuals, and I just see, you know, the extraordinary work and dedication and duty and humility that they both possess. And those people who meet them, and I've spoken to people who meet them, and they say that you see them on a walkabout, the king on a walkabout, he probably spends far more time chatting to people than he should do, and he's probably chivied around, you know, by his staff, because he's genuinely interested in what people have to say. He's curious. You know, he's generous with his time. And I think people just see more and more of that now that, you know, they are king and queen.
And that chemistry between them is really important. Tell us a bit about the dynamic of their relationship. I felt that it was played out to perfection during Fountain Pen Gate. I mean, I don't know what they're both like behind palace gates when things go wrong, which aren't funny, but obviously the fountain pen deeply irritated him. She was there to calm and soothe. Is that what you've observed as far as how they relate to each other?
I think it could be a bit of yin and yang. I think he may be the Eeyore to her Tigger.
Yes.
You know, where he says, you know, why are people saying this? Why is this happening? You know, he is a perfectionist. He is a workaholic. And she will sort of chivvy him along and say, look, darling, you know, don't worry about that. You know, we've got this to do now. And, you know, she's sort of very much jollying him. And, you know, people, who knows how relationships work?
Yes.
You know.
But it would have been a sorry state of affairs yesterday to see him crowned alone.
Yeah, oh, totally. Yeah. It would almost remind one of the Queen, the late Queen, at Prince Philip's funeral.
Yes.
Again, alone, without
Cutting a
your
lonely
partner.
figure.
You know, everyone, I can't think of anyone who didn't say how sorrowful that looked on cameras. So I totally agree with you. Him being crowned monarch on his own, and it's a massive job. My goodness, you know, being head of state to 15 realms, including the United Kingdom, you know, it's huge. And you know, he has the support of the woman he loves to fulfil that destiny.
And the support of at least his eldest son. What did you make of particularly the Princess of Wales yesterday? I mean, some of the imagery of Kate is just stunning. I felt she couldn't have looked more regal.
Yes.
She looked like a queen in waiting, didn't she, Elsa?
She looked beautiful. She's magnificent. And she's like that behind the scenes too.
Is she? What's she
Camilla.
like? Because people are so intrigued by her because she doesn't speak up all that often. She remains a little bit like the late Queen in that she's an enigma. And yet I know women are quite obsessed by her. I know all my girlfriends are like, what's she really like? What is she like?
Well, when I've seen her in private, she is kindness personified and generous with her time. I remember her coming into our press office in Buckingham Palace and having a tour around and meeting the team shortly after the wedding, basically
Yes.
just to say thank you. Now, she didn't have to do that, but she did. And for those people who worked very, very hard during the royal wedding in 2012, you know, that was 2011. That was extraordinarily kind. And, you know, that little bit of stardust, that magic, will stay with people forever.
Of course. Now let's talk about the spares, because I know you also worked closely with both Prince Harry and the Duke of York. Let's deal with Harry first of all. I mean, do you think the firm, so to speak, managed that situation okay? I mean, obviously he was relegated to the third row. He was obscured by the Princess Royal's feathered hat. I mean, from a PR perspective, Elsa, how do you think that all played out?
Relegated to the third row, I think people might bite your right arm off to be in the
Yes.
third row of
Yeah.
Westminster Abbey, to be watching a coronation of a king. I think it was wonderful that he came. I really do. I thought he looked relaxed when he walked into the
Yes.
Abbey. You know, he was smiling at people. He was chatting to his cousins. I thought it was lovely. And just there to show support to his father.
Not much support, though.
And
Elsa. I mean,
stepmother.
he's there for a few minutes. He doesn't seem to speak to anyone
2
apart
hours.
from...
2 hours is not a few minutes, Camilla.
I know, but he had no interaction at all with Prince William. He didn't seem to have much interaction at all with his father. You've got this juxtaposed situation of a brother on one hand pledging to be the liege man of life and limb and having a kiss on the cheek of the king, and then you have the other brother heading back to Heathrow as soon as the crown's been placed upon the royal head.
Well, he didn't have a part to play because he's not the heir apparent. And, of course, it was Prince Archie's birthday yesterday,
Yes.
his 4th birthday. And, you know, Prince Harry having to combine his official duty as the king's youngest son with his duty as a father. And we know, as working women, it's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yes.
So he managed to, well done him for doing both yesterday.
And how about the Duke of York? He's in his garter robes. That was quite unexpected because I suppose people thought his uniform as well as his seating might have been relegated because of the fact he's no longer a working royal. That distinction was drawn again yesterday. Should he have been in those robes?
Well, he's entitled to. He is a member of the Order of the Garter.
I know, but the optics, I'm asking you in a PR capacity, Elsa. What
Again, I'm sure he asked the question, and I'm sure the question would have gone straight up to the top, and the answer obviously was yes, wear them.
So it might indicate a softening by the king towards his brother.
Again, I don't know. It is hard to know. He didn't, he was there in support of his brother, the king. He wasn't on the balcony. It was the working royals on the balcony. I love the balcony scene. I love the fact that there were the older generation of members of the royal family. The Gloucesters
and Princess Alexandra, who does so much without a fanfare.
Absolutely. So I thought that was... It was lovely. It was really, really fantastic.
But you are an expert in reputational management, and is there any...
After this interview, I probably won't be.
No, you're absolutely brilliant, and it's hugely insightful. But the Duke of York, can he be rehabilitated? I mean, he got booed on the way in.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear anything like that at all.
But can he build it back up, do you think?
Who knows? If I had a crystal ball, you look at, you look at people in the past who, John Perfumo, for example.
Yes. But you have to then dedicate yourself to good works and keep a low profile, maybe not parade around in garter robes.
Yeah, well, who knows? Who knows what will happen and what he will want to do.
Final word, just woman to woman. Penny Mordaunt.
Yes.
Can I have your thoughts, please?
Well, I've got a great friend called Beck, and she was texting me yesterday saying she looks amazing. Who's done her makeup? She looks fantastic. Each to their own.
I know. Do you know what? I'm thinking that Penny Mordaunt, now she's become a star of stage and screen.
She's meant to be something from a Game of Thrones, isn't she?
Something like that. But I tell you what, she might need more PR help. Elsa, I think there could be a job there because she's political royalty. This is the thing.
She sure is.
Elsa Anderson, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Lovely to see you. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to be speaking to Robert Honegger, who is one of the very few members of the public who were invited to yesterday's coronation. He was offered a place after opening his catering business to a soup kitchen during the pandemic, and he'll be telling us all about the big day. Don't go anywhere, we'll be back very soon.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Forward from this. Join us.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, a coronation special live from Buckingham Palace. Now, can you imagine receiving an email and then an invitation on your map to go to the coronation if you're just an ordinary member of the public? I mean, I say ordinary, but Robert Honegger is the owner of Humdinger's Catering, and they were one of the few members of the public who were invited to the coronation ceremony. Robert,
yes.
Tell us everything. What was it like? You arrived super early, I believe.
Super early, like everyone else seemed to do as well. So
Right.
it was a bit like, but everybody was so nice in the line. It seemed like everybody had a medal for some reason. and
Yes.
they were all there to celebrate the Kings, and it was amazing. It really
And
was.
tell us why you were invited.
Well, I was invited because we did this soup kitchen and food bank on Hoxton Street.
Yes.
So we fed lots of people, and we fed the Royal London Hospital, and we helped out lots of other hospitals as well for kind of morale and things that could get in the right.
And you were one of several hundred British Empire medalists to be
Yes,
invited.
yes.
And were you all seated together? What kind of view did you have, Robert?
I had a fantastic view.
Did you? Tell us everything about that.
I was 2 rows back in the middle, underneath the kind of underneath one of the biggest pillars, so
Right.
no one could sit there.
Oh, good.
So I could step to one side when we were standing, so the people behind me could see.
And your view isn't obscured by a pillar. You've got a clear
No,
view
I
of
could see perfectly.
what, the whole crowning?
Well, no, not the crowning, but everything coming in.
Oh, wonderful.
Because
So-
we were in the first part, and
Yes.
then they go into the second part, and we watched the crowning on telly.
So you're seated from about 7 a.m.
7 a.m.
What
yes.
did you do in between then and when they did the pre-music, so to speak?
Well, we had lots going on. I mean,
Yes.
there was lots of really nice people. Katy Perry was 2 rows behind us.
Was she now?
Yeah, so that
She
was
looked
good.
like she was a bit of a lost soul because she didn't have a +1. You didn't have a
Well,
+1.
no one was allowed a +1.
So who was Katy Perry chatting
No,
to?
well, you just needed to make friends. That was the whole point. I
Yes.
think it was a very good idea to kind of really get the room going, to stick them together from 7 to 11. And by the end of it, I think most of us all made friends with each other. It was quite.
And tell us about when the music really started playing.
Yeah.
I mean, we heard that wonderful opera singer, Pretty Yende,
Yes, yeah.
dressed in that amazing yellow
Yeah.
dress. I'm loving yellow at the moment this weekend. She sounded fantastic. I can't even imagine how spine-tingling it was to hear that Zadok the priest in the flesh.
It was. The whole experience was still overwhelming, and going through it, and it's still, it's one of those things that you can tell your grandchildren about, I'm sure.
And were you belting out the hymns
I was
and
trying to
involving
sing
yourself
as much as I could.
possible?
Yes, I did. I did have the survey, and I did do as much as I could.
And tell us about that moment when the procession starts and you see the King for the first time and the Queen. Just tell us about what was going through your head. By the way, if you can hear this, we've got a marching band in the background, which is completely fitting of a live broadcast from Buckingham Palace.
I mean, there was a wait outside, so you could see the King outside, waiting to come in.
Yeah, that was the 5-minute delay.
Yeah.
Something had gone wrong.
Yeah, so when we were wondering what was going on there,
Yes.
but when he came in, it was lots of very wonderful people were walking through the room, so you were kind of quite gobsmacked.
You could drop some names.
Well,
Tell
there
me
was Lionel Richie there.
Lionel Richie, wonderful.
Anton Deck.
Anton Deck. They got a round of applause, apparently.
Yeah.
It's like, and then apparently a foreign journalist said, "Who are they?" And then Tim Stanley from the Telegraph said there are a couple of former prime ministers.
Yeah, exactly.
Apparently they were believed. Who else? Jill Biden,
Gordon Brown as
Gordon
well.
Brown,
yeah,
you saw? Did you see Boris Johnson?
Yes, I saw them all. Yes, we saw all the Boris Johnsons.
And at that moment where the crown is being placed on the King's head, Justin Welby had to adjust it slightly. What was the atmosphere like in the actual Abbey? Silence? Total silence?
It was complete silence. It was, people were just really... I mean, it was one of the... It was you could feel it all tingling, like you said. It was one of these experiences that...
And were you allowed to take photos?
No, there's no cameras.
So presumably you're in all your finery. What did you wear to the event?
I had my tails on. So,
Lovely.
Yeah.
Top hat?
No top hat, just because I was worried about people seeing behind me.
Very good point, yeah. Princess Anne and
yeah.
Prince Harry suffered
Exactly, yeah.
feathered hat syndrome. So you're in all of your finery, but you're not allowed to record anything. That's interesting.
So you're allowed your phone, but you just don't, no recording, no anything. Well, it seemed fine as well, because then it's just things you remember. At the beginning, they let you take a photo.
Yeah.
So there was a few selfies and a few all of this, but there was, realistically, it was we just wanted to make sure it went well.
And didn't you find it surprising, maybe, that when you received the email invitation and then the invitation on the mat, which is beautiful, it's all embossed, it's very in the vein of the King being a champion of the environment. Did you think, well, it's interesting that the palace behind us has sort of discovered and tapped into the fact that we were doing this soup kitchen, that we were helping people out in the pandemic? I mean, it suggests that the King and Queen's people, at least, are watching. Tell us a bit about the community effort you've been involved in.
Well, I mean, we thought the Queen had been watching as well, and this was the late Queen, because it was like certain food companies that can't be named suddenly turned up with pallet loads of food.
Oh, really?
That weren't weren't really supposed to come to us, but then they've been paid for by someone that we're not allowed to know and stuff.
But just explain to the viewers and the listeners, you're still continuing with this community effort, right? How many people are you feeding?
It's around 1,000 people a week.
Right.
Yeah, and we want to make this more, so we want to hit in work poverty as well. So you can come out your office building and find us out there giving soup and bread away.
But isn't that massively eating into your profit margins?
Well, it doesn't help, but at the same time, if we don't enjoy work, it's not really worth doing it. So I think like this, it encourages people to use us for more of the big and the more exciting jobs.
And has the cost of living crisis had an impact on who you're seeing coming in for extra food?
Yes, definitely.
I mean, I say extra food. For this, is this their only meal of the day often?
Often, yeah, and usually we give them 3 or 4, so they can stay. If they want to wait around to the end, they're welcome to.
And what kind of people, Robert?
It's
Families?
everybody. You'll get some that you expect and some that you wouldn't expect. Things are hard at the moment. People can't afford to heat the house or to eat, so they come and eat with us.
And if you look at the overall experience, what has it made you feel about monarchy? What's it made you feel about the King and Queen?
Well, it's not about what they're getting. It's about what they're giving to us. Definitely, and I think it's about what his reign will bring on Britain, and I think he can be a great king, and I think it's given me the inspiration to push it further with what we're doing as Humdingers as a company, where lots of people say this isn't the way to do it, but we just carry on and
this idea of giving something back, basically serving others rather than serving yourself.
Exactly, but that's what we feel we got from what we got from the King, yes.
And then what will you be saying to children? I mean, presumably your children were aware you were going.
No, they were.
I mean, do you feel that you've had this front row seat in history? You're going to be passing on the knowledge of this?
Well, I'll try my very best, and there's lots of stories to be told, and James was thrilled to be able to stay up till 8 o'clock talking about it last night.
Well, Robert, you've had a great time, you've had a great weekend. Thank you very much for sharing all the details with us this morning. Now, Robert Buckland, we are bringing you back in because we've decided to do something a little bit special. This is our last outdoor broadcast from Buckingham Palace, and as well as being a top politician, Sir Robert Buckland has got quite a unique skill. Tell us a little about what you do and how you do it.
Well, I do like bursting into song at random moments.
It's very Welsh of you, if I may say.
Well, I know I'm fitting the stereotype really, really well, am I not? But I've been singing since I was a kid, and I just love singing.
You've been in choirs?
Oh yes, choirs in college, choirs. I just like a bit of karaoke as well. So,
well, it's going to be more solemn and significant than karaoke, but what we'd love you to do is sing us out today.
Right.
I feel that Robert and I should be standing for this.
Yes, I think we should stand.
Well, I'm worried about the mic.
All right,
I might need to lift the mic. You
All right.
sit, you
All right,
sit, and be comfortable. We're going to stand just out of respect. Sir Robert Buckland, take it away, please.
God save our gracious King, long live our noble King. God save the King, send him victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the King.
Wonderful.
Robert, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that for us. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. We've had quite the royal time of it at Buckingham Palace. Of course, we're going to be back next week at 9:30 as usual. But up next, it's Arlene Foster.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.